Good morning and welcome to Straight Talk. A lot to get to this morning. You know, it was December 13th where protesters stood on the Brooklyn Bridge in New York and shouted the words, "What do we want? Dead cops." Well, just a week later, those protesters sadly got their wish as two New York police officers were gunned down in what can be described as an execution. The gunman himself then ran to the subway station where he was chased by police and then put a gun to his head and killed himself and took his own life. But of course, this is a heated area of the United States when it comes to protests, when it comes to rhetoric. Ross McLean is here to talk a lot about this morning because I think this is a story, Ross, that everybody is paying attention to.
Yeah, and there's a lot more to the story than just a lot of the bumper sticker headlines that are coming out of it that people need to look at, Ryan. And as you point out, these two officers were basically ambush assassinated. In many ways, not a surprise to see this coming. We had in New Brunswick, the RCMP officers ambushed assassinated by almost a similar sort of psyche of a man. There were two officers doing almost the exact same as these two officers here down in Las Vegas, sitting eating pizza, who were gunned down by a couple of unstable people who then ran into the Walmart and lost their lives. So here we have these two officers ambushed, executed. It's a new day for looking at how policing is going to be done and the conversations that need to take place.
Does it surprise you, given how ramped up this rhetoric has been? You've got all sorts of people out there from the likes of Al Sharpton and what have you. Also New York's mayor himself, Mayor de Blasio, who was out there supporting the protesters, even though they were chanting the most vicious things at police officers who were not responsible for a crime. But those two police officers in particular were out there protecting a community.
Yeah, and what we're seeing on all sides of this, people at the extremist ends of it, the kill police, we don't like police, dead cops, yelling at one end. And look at the majority of people do not hate cops. They're not anti-cop. They may want to have an intelligent discussion about some practices, some things that have happened, changes that are needed, but they don't want to, that's not most people. Any more than most cops are bad cops that most people want to complain about and think they should lose their job and they're no good. I mean, the extremism is on both ends. And I don't think either party is helping each other by ramping some of that up, Ryan.
You were a police officer for quite some time. Would you want to put a uniform on today and, let's say, serve the citizens of New York City on the heels of this?
Let me tell you, when I had my career in policing, we had at one point, it became very political in this city of Toronto. There was not a worse time to police than when it was political, because you wanted to do your job, you wanted to serve. In this case now, we're seeing that the Police Association for New York is saying, hey, that's it. No more dealing with people who are confrontational. Don't bother arresting anybody unless you need to. They're almost in essence going on a slowdown. So, a police officer, he goes out, feels he needs to make an arrest. Is he going to get, sort of picked on by some people in the department? Or is he going to say, oh, good job? It's almost a can't win when you're trying to be a political policeman. So for the frontline officers, this is a very difficult time.
Yeah, you mentioned some of those changes. Don't patrol alone. If you're going to a call, wait till a second cruiser shows up. Make sure you're wearing Kevlar or the bulletproof vest at all times. These are not standard procedures, but these are now things that are going out not just in New York, but across the country down there.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, and I've talked about this before on the network, because I've worked on the policing side and I've worked on the close protection side, protecting people from being assassinated like these officers were. They were assassinated. They didn't stand a chance. They were ambushed. There's different skill sets that the police are going to have to use, and it's not going to be just as simple as backup always showing up. It's going to be more than that. They're going to have to recognize where the threats are and what they do. They're not going to be able to sit at the side of the road on overtime and have a slice of pizza, which is what happened to these poor officers.
Yeah, and I mean, this was in an area of New York where they had asked, actually, there's a housing project that had a lot of crime, a lot of gang crime going on in that particular unit. They had asked for more policing. They wanted their community to be safer. It's going to be tougher for the cops to say yes to those type of requests if they know their officers are going to be out there sitting in a cruiser where they're sitting ducks. I mean, they're sitting ducks because of the uniform they wear and because of the car that they're in.
Look, absolutely. I mean, they're sitting there. And I have said before, I talked about here when it comes to Canada as we look at this, I said before, I think we need to have the option of the death penalty in Canada for ambush killings of uniformed police officers. And here's the reason why. The job is tough enough, Ryan. When you go out and you're doing your job, okay, you get a call to a holdup. Okay, shields up, You know, condition red, here we go, we're ready for trouble, we're looking for it. But the officers, when they're just sitting having a pizza in their neighborhood, in their community, aren't operating that way. But now we're saying you're going to have to go to even more than yellow alert, almost red alert at all times when you're doing your job. That's an almost unsustainable level of pressure for these officers.
When you look at the gunman himself, this guy had a long rap sheet. There will be a lot of people out there that will say this is a matter of psychiatric assessment. This is a person who is clearly unstable. But you can't ignore the fact that this individual had an agenda. And that agenda was fueled by the likes of Al Sharpton and by the likes of those protesters that are standing on the Brooklyn Bridge saying that we want dead cops. This guy had written on his Instagram page and on his Facebook page that he wanted to give pigs, that's the term he used, he wanted to give pigs wings. That can't be discounted from this conversation, and I fear that it might be.
It shouldn't. I think any rhetoric that calls for anything less than peaceful protests, good discussions. And look, we've also seen the widow of Garner, the man who was choked, who I can't breathe, all the protests in New York. She put out a statement saying she abhors this. She thinks this is wrong. The parents of Michael Brown, who had died in said, we abhor that. We don't want violence on this. Stop this violence. We don't need to go to this. We really don't. And I think we're going to need some leadership. Look, the Police Association of New York now is turning its back on the mayor. They're calling for intervention, that someone else needs to come down and speak and intervene between the mayor and the police department. Now, I'd encourage the police department to take another look at just their communications on this. Let's get heads level. Let's get the police and the community back together. That's where they are. That's where the majority of them are, Ryan.
Yeah, I think a lot of these protesters, some of them are well-intentioned, others are out there to start trouble, and they don't really understand the fact that their words may just be words to them. But to somebody who's on the edge, to somebody who's got that hate in his heart, to somebody that really does want to put their name all over the paper, they'll take them up on the offer. They'll take them up and say, listen, I'll drive my car from Baltimore to New York City. I've got a gun. I'll use it. I'll find a couple of cops that are sitting there, and I'll lie in wait, and I'll take them out.
Yeah, and you bring up a very good point. People who are basically unstable. Now, whether we want to say they're mentally ill, however you want to describe them. This guy had a long record with weapons, violence offenses. His mother even said, I think he's unstable. He needed mental help. I wasn't sure if he was on medications. And yeah, they are set off by listening to this sort of stuff. They think, yeah, I'm going to go do that. So when people print and yell out these words, dead cops, kill, they got to realize that there are unstable people who will be encouraged to act on that. And you know what? That's not a responsible thing to say anyways. They should be chanting good cops. Let's have great cops. Great cops. We want great cops.
Yeah.
Not we want dead cops.
Well, and I would probably put the media in this camp as well, because the likes of, and I'll call them out for who they are, CNN down in the United States, I think does nothing more than pour gasoline on top of a pile of matches that are lit. And, they basically try to get this situation ramped up to the highest level it possibly can be at. And then you have people that are willing to act on it. And I think that they take a part of the blame and deserve to look in the mirror themselves as to how they've baited people into this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and on both sides, you said there's networks who have poured gas from both sides, and you're seeing this become more political now. We're seeing ex-mayors come out and say, Rudy Giuliani, well, I never would have done any. This never would have happened under my administration. I mean, come on. We've got police officers dead who are hunted down and killed in the streets. Policing is an institution that every civil society needs, same as we need roads and clean water and fresh food. Policing is an institution we need, and we need to support that and get it on the right rails. And I don't think we're at that point right now where that discussion is taking place. Now there's just a lot of headbanging between the two sides, and I think the media should maybe try and get in the middle and narrow the discussion a bit more.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all on that. But where does this take policing then in the future? I mean, obviously things are tense right now. My gut tells me that things are only going to get worse. That we're going to feel those tensions increase, that this kind of assassination, as you call it, and I think that's an apt term for it, it may be repeated, unfortunately. And we may see replicas, we may see repeats of something like this.
I can't disagree with you.
Yeah.
I think we are. One of the things I said when all those protests were going on over I Can't Breathe in Ferguson, I said, I hope some politician does stand up and not say, oh, we hate cops, cops are no good, but say, look, I hear you people. We're going to take actions, we're going to talk, we're going to try to find a way to put this on the rails. You can't ignore the overwhelming protest of the public saying they need changes. And that's not anti-police. I said the majority of those people aren't anti-police. They don't hate police. There is that faction. They should be disowned and turned down. Where it's going to go, Ryan, I think it's going to get tough. Every police shooting now is going to be under the microscope. Every one of them. Every one of them. And every police officer is going to be scared over the next little while as to what's going on.
Ross McLean, appreciate the expertise this morning.